This is Dateline News and Conversation. It's going to be an interesting discussion tonight. We're going to be talking about a number of things. But first, let me introduce my guest. She's back on the show, Alanna Hartsock. She's an educator, an activist, a consultant, and a lecturer in the areas of economic democracy, land rights, financing sustainable development, and public finance reform. These are all new topics for me and probably for many of you. Alanna is the co-director of Earth Rights Institute, a civil society organization working for, I love this, economic justice and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. And she's a United Nations NGO representative for the International Union for Land Value Taxation. We're going to learn about this tonight, but first, let me welcome to the show Alanna Hartsock. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Regis. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I want to take this slow and easy tonight, Alanna, because for me and for a lot of people, there's a lot to get our minds around. So give me a little bit of background on how you arrived at where you are today. And then I know you have some slides that we're going to show, and then we'll see where it goes. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And first, I really appreciated your recent conversation with Peter Kuznick and focus on Russia and the truth about Russia and U.S.-Russian relationships. And also, you both shared how you had been to the ceremonies in Hiroshima. So I wanted to share some of my personal background on those topics. First, I was a young junior year abroad student in Vienna, 1968 and 69. Now, 1968 in that fall was the time that the president or the leader of Czechoslovakia, Dubček, was trying to have more autonomy and break free from the Soviet Union. But the Soviets set tanks and troops into Prague, and there was damage done there, and that was suppressed. But some of us had the idea that we would rent a van and drive to Prague, which we did just 5 weeks after the Soviet tanks had rolled in, and there were still Soviet Russian troops stationed there. So we went into Prague. A photojournalist showed us around where the buildings had been shelled and burned. I even went through a bit of the burnt building and picked up some burnt Christmas ornaments that I brought home. It's a souvenir of the experience. Then we thought, what if we went out and met the Soviet soldiers, mostly Russian soldiers? So we decided to go out to their barracks. We went out to the barracks. Now there's about 10 of us, and about 10 of them came out of their building, and we started conversing with the translator, Russian, English. We started sharing little items, cigarettes, and those little pins that the Russian Soviet people always had. We took photos with a Polaroid camera that we had, gave them pictures. And the whole idea of enemy totally dropped. We had our arms locked around with the pictures taken. They're just kids like us, 18, 19-year-olds, wanting to go back to Leningrad at the time or Moscow and be with their girlfriends. So that became my life quest of why they had become an enemy. Later that year, that summer of 1969, I also traveled to Kiev. Actually, we started Vienna, Warsaw, Kiev, Moscow, Leningrad, now St. Petersburg again. And everywhere I saw, there were people like me. I think the biggest realization is that all human beings everywhere bleed when we're cut, cry when we're sad, laugh when we're happy. We are all human beings, first and foremost. We all are one human family. So I saw the beautiful subways in Moscow, even 1969, beautiful. I saw the wonderful Russian culture. Sure, I saw some problems, but every country has its pluses and minuses. So that was that 2 weeks. Then in 1980, I was invited to participate in a World People's Assembly, a traveling trip from Tokyo to Osaka, to Kyoto, and then to Hiroshima. So there were people from 40 countries on that. It was amazing. And in Hiroshima, for the ceremony, I found myself sitting between two of them on that conference tour, both Russians. One was the president or the secretary of the Soviet Peace Committee, and the other was Gennady Gerasimov. They'd both become friends of mine during that tour of Japan. And we were so solicitous when it started raining to make sure that the Japanese people had umbrellas in the rain. I mean, our heart desire to protect was awakened seeing the horrible destruction in the center of Hiroshima. I also have a dear Russian friend, Tatiana Roshkoshnia. We've worked together with United Nations programs. So that's been my awakening. I mean, then I had to find out what's causing these wars and this idea that the Russian people are enemies. So I could go into the slides now, or shall we have a little conversation? Or shall I start sharing the economics of war and peace slides? Shall I do that, Regis? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Can you see those clearly?
Yes, very well.
Oh, good. Essentials of economic rent and the war economy. Now, that's the big concept. Once people understand this, they're going to grasp the whole policy approach. So here we see a naturally just and harmonious society with everyone has fair access to the gifts of nature in order to procure their livelihood. So people with unobstructed access to land, which is the earth itself, everything, the water, the sky, all that is the creator's gift that humans did not make. In classical economics was called land. Classical economics, starting back the physiocrats in France, was land, labor, and capital. Very important, three factors. So access to land, you can create the wealth that you need, what you need for your housing, your shelter, your clothing, your food. None of this is obstructed. There is a circle. The people applying their effort, their labor to the earth creates what you need. We all come in with 10 fingers, and these 10 fingers work up the earth, which is the basics of all wealth. If you look around, wherever you're sitting right now, everything on your desk or looking outside comes from the earth. It's a simple idea, but I think we got to really recognize what this means for fairness, that societies who have the fair access to Mother Earth have a balance and an equilibrium. So let me see if I can get this slide to shift. Now, you see a very different picture here where we saw this unobstructed flow of people to the earth, to the wealth. We now have two guns. Now, the big picture on economics of peace of understanding where the violence begins. The first gun, we see this term rent. Now, what we mean is economic rent. Mean the land rent. It means that some people have to pay other people for access to Mother Earth. That's a point of violence. In the Western society, John Mohawk, an indigenous scholar and elder, said that the problem in the Western world began 500 years ago with the enclosures. That's when the people of the land, the common people, were forced off the land by the land barons as they gained more power and control, and they were thrown into hunger, impoverishment, starvation, and they were thrown into essentially a market economy where without access to Mother Earth, because they had been fenced out of the common lands, if they made it and survived in the cities, they had to find a way to make something that the rich people could buy. So then you had people buying and selling and trying their best to make a living by making something that rich people with then cash could buy. So the only way they could get back any land was then to earn money and buy land. So that's the first problem, understanding the land problem, is that a few by force, by violence, came to own the vast majority of the earth's land and resources. Now, the privilege fund. What is this privilege fund? Okay, I'm going to read. When people must pay rent for access to land, the exploitation of labor begins. Because of the rent leak, people cannot get capital, money, anything, without borrowing from the privilege fund lending system and paying interest. Okay, so there's privilege fund is an unearned income. People who own vast amounts of land and resources are living with a lot of unearned profit. And as economy grows, the land values in the city and elsewhere grow faster than the return to wages. So the privilege fund grows. So when you can't really accumulate enough cash to say make a mortgage, to buy a house, then you're beholden to the debt system. See the other gun. It says interest. In fair societies, money is treated just as exchange value. It's not treated where people have to borrow at interest from other people who have more than they do. So that's usury. This is another form of unearned income, when those who simply have acquired more money than the rest can then charge the rest simply to live. And the mortgage payments go up and up, so that you have 30 and now is moving into 50-year mortgages in the United States. So the vast amount of your earnings from your labor are going to pay the interest on your mortgage. So these are the two, land and money, obstructions to a fair society, creating unearned income for the few, the privilege fund. Oh, now we have a full-grown war economy because the privileged funders' goal is to protect and further their wealth. And they have disproportionate power and control of the reins of government because of their vast wealth. The government, so-called democracies, get corrupted. The few come to control foreign policy. In the United States, we the people have never been included in discussions around foreign policy. It's always been the domain of the elites. I was a candidate for Congress 2 times, one for the Green Party, the second for the Democratic Party. And no one in all of my touring about with those campaigns, no one even asked me the question about US foreign policy or the wars. And that's what Congress was set up to do. But now we've lost that because now we have a unitary president that, of his own will, like an emperor, is waging wars. And this is at the behest of the elites and those few who want more and more power and control over land and resources. So, as you see in the pictures, you have a full-blown military imperialist system. You have armaments, military-industrial complex, profiteering, and you have foreign investments, meaning, oh, we will invest in your country, speaking World Bank, IMF, and here are the structural adjustments and the changes you need to make to your governance so that you can get this loan. Or we're going to do this, but you've got to pay us this kind of interest. So collectors of the privilege fund, that unearned income, They invest in land and resources in so-called underdeveloped countries. And to quell protests from the people, these investors call for the military intervention. So our military is come to be controlled by the nefarious intentions of the wealthy and the rich. This is the last of these four great slides. You'll see there's no guns, there's no blockages. What there is that's different from the first slide is a resource rent fund. So that was once the privilege fund, but all that unearned income from land and resources is now equitably returned to society by the public collection of land and resource rents. We'll talk about that. And now the workers, with their just economic opportunities restored, can now accumulate capital savings through their own savings. So economic justice, abundance, and peace are restored. Now let me roll that out for you. And I call this earth rights democracy, because you see there the US Capitol, but now the new role for earth rights democracy would be to establish fair share rights to the earth by birthright for each and every person. The earth is our birthright by natural law. So that unearned income that accrues to the value of land and resources, you see, as we move along in so-called development, land and resources become increasingly valuable. The price increases as there is speculation, profiteering, land hoarding, land grabbing, and the phrase that I have come to loathe, which is making a killing in real estate. Real estate, that meant the royal estate, that meant the land of the king. Make a killing in real estate, land speculation. I can't tell you, my body just cringes when I hear make a killing in real estate, because that's killing people. This land problem is killing us. The power and control of the wealthy and the few is killing us in many ways. In my community in small town Pennsylvania, I am hearing of more families who can't pay the rent, they're becoming homeless. When it happens in small town Pennsylvania, it's everywhere. It starts in our cities. The homeless problem grows in the cities, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, and then it spreads out as land values increase and the wages of people can't keep up with this increase in the cost of housing, which is due to land value increase. So what this privilege fund, how does it get equitably restored? This is an elegant solution. Regis, this is such a marvelous solution, but I've tracked this solution back thousands of years, looking at economic history, looking at perennial wisdom teachings on economic justice. And first of all, you do not tax work. You do not tax the good things, because taxation is the power to create or destroy. So if I'm going to grow food for myself, government shouldn't tax it. Or if I'm going to work in a shop or anything, I'm working. It's my labor. Don't take my labor from me. That's theft. So we work to remove taxes, the burden of taxes from labor, wages, and production. Now that immediately increases purchasing capacity when you don't tax labor. My son said, Mom, if I wasn't being taxed, I would be making an okay income. And then you shift it. Now, this is a tax shift. It doesn't mean a tax increase. It's a shift off of wages and houses, production, effort, onto the commons rent, the economic rent, the land rent. It goes by different names, which is maybe why it's challenging to get clear about it. But as we showed that the wealth accumulates through the charging of access to land, and that creates that privilege fund of unearned income, we shift the tax base onto the unearned income from land and resources, which is actually land value is created by society as a whole. It's a socially created value. You have schools, transportation, good roads, and libraries. All of those things make an area desirable, which increases the land value, but those things are created by society. We, the people, in our cooperation, create the land value. By rights, the land value belongs to the people. That is what should be socialized. So we socialize this when we shift the tax base to the economic rent, the land rent, the commons rent. We further privatize the income by not taxing privately earned wealth, which is our wages. Now, this is beyond old right and old left, and this is a way to honor both freedom and fairness, create fair free market economy, maximum fairness, maximum freedom. So I had a sign made up, I put it in my front yard. It's called Warfare or Earth Share. Thou shalt not kill. Hey, we got to learn the basics. We're not supposed to kill each other. So I have a few more slides, but maybe I'll stop here. We can talk about it.
Okay, that's really fascinating, Alanna. I've got to ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Uh, it all sounds great. I would love not to have to pay taxes on my earned income, on my Social Security,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
on when I had property. That makes a lot of sense. But there's a couple of things that, for me, are going to represent huge threats to implementing this different paradigm of taxation. Number one, to most American and most capitalists, they're going to scream socialism. They're going to scream communism immediately. I mean, that's the first thing that came to my mind. I'm not a capitalist. I hate capitalism. I'm not a communist. I'm not a socialist, but I believe in these social principles, let's say fairness and equity. I don't like putting a label on what that is, but that's one of the problems I see from people who hear the word socialism or capitalism go nuts. Second of all, the capitalists, that wealthy elite that exists all over the world, they ain't going to like this. So, my question, Alanna, I know you have an answer because you've been working at this for 30 years.
Try 50.
50 years. Okay. Okay. Um, you feel like you've made some success, or do you feel like you've been a failure? I mean, Jesus, when you look at who the president of the United States is, for God's sake, this guy is a shyster. He's a real estate developer. He's the art of the deal. Steve Witkoff, his buddy from all these years, is his number one envoy to make peace in Jesus, Israel, if you can believe that, and Russia. Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, a Jew, he wants to build, a Trump Atlantic City resort on the bones of the Palestinians. And he shows up last week with Witkoff in Russia. And I'm saying, what the hell is this all about? Well, it's all about what you're talking about. It's the evil.
Yes.
Am I right? It's the evil that this system has produced. It's the rape and pillage of countries and economies around the world, which in fact is the rape and pillage of the people in those countries. And as you pointed out, it's the root cause, I think you said, of war. It's
Yeah.
profitable. It makes these
Yes.
people ultra rich. And then you talked about land. I read your book, The Earth Belongs to Everyone. I encourage everybody to try to get a copy of that. The Earth Belongs to Everyone. Land. Jeez. Bill Gates been buying up acres and acres of farmland. He's got this crazy idea that they're going to manufacture food. And and it's all about money for him, but it's also about eugenics. People like him and these wealthy people really, I believe, want to limit the population. They want to get rid of us who don't create anything. This is diametrically opposed to everything you've been talking about. It's people who create wealth. It's the land that creates wealth, not these shysters, these hucksters, these Bill Gates and these Donald Trumps and all these people that are around him. All right, so tell me if I'm right or wrong.
You're absolutely right. Very clear. This is a big, bold picture. Once you see the big, bold picture, you say, oh, you get it. What do we do about it? So you're kind of asking that in the beginning. And I wanted to reel off some ways that the policy, in part, has been practically implemented, this tax shift, uh, coming from different approaches. But one, I want to know, what do you think of Singapore? Do you know about their public finance or much about Singapore, Regis?
I don't know anything
Well,
about finance
it's
about
it's
anywhere.
a very powerful little nation state. Um, it it looks like a fascinating place to visit. It looks like a very, very healthy economy. Um, Now, Singapore has a land lease system, and this goes back to British period in part. So their land is not profiteering for the most part. The government receives lease fees for the land of Singapore, and you have a much higher degree of affordable housing and other of the good things in Singapore. It seems to be a very safe city, a very well managed city. That's far away in Singapore. Now we're going to bring it back to my state of Pennsylvania in the United States, where okay, let's start with the city of Harrisburg, our capital, which in the late 70s into 80s, 81, I think it was named the second most distressed city in the United States. Only East St. Louis was worse. It was in bad shape. The city council was looking everywhere for answers. One individual, his name was Stephen Cord, showed up and he started telling about how you could shift your property tax off of the buildings and onto the land value. Now, this is usually where we begin with this reform, with the local property tax, and then we expand it from there. So, okay, they had about, oh, it was 4 to 5 thousand boarded up buildings in the city of 50,000. Homeless people downtown. It was the second worst city in the country, Harrisburg. They started moving in this direction with their local property tax. Now, within, I want to say, 5 years, those boarded up buildings being held for speculation and land hoarding, suddenly you had to pay your tax based on the value of the land, which went up, not on the value of your building, which went down. Ah, well, that means if I do something and get my building in better repair, that's a good thing for my taxes. And if I don't do anything, if I let it vacant, I'm going to pay a lot more taxes than I do now with the upside down property tax that taxes our houses more than our land value, hence giving a real loophole for the rich and the wealthy who own land and resources. Okay, so the boarded up buildings went from several thousand to a few hundred. Employment rate increased, safety and security, crime decreased, arson decreased. There were a number of indicators. And over the next few years, they kept making a bigger shift. They shifted more taxes off of the houses and onto the land value, more housing being built and fixed up, better jobs. The city was having finances to pay more for parks and services. And I recall reading a news story say, we don't know how Mayor Stephen Reed is doing this, but it's certainly working for Harrisburg. All right. So it began winning awards for its city services. So that's one example. And that was because the town council was desperate to try to do something that helped improve the city, the second worst city in the country. Now we have Allentown. After that, we had Allentown, Pennsylvania, our third largest city. And they actually had a city councilman who initiated a vote, a referendum for the people. And the people voted in to freeze all other taxes except the tax on the land value. So they were moving into the land value tax. Now, those few that you mentioned you're concerned about that had more land, and they were like, okay, there was a group that had 50 acres downtown and they only used it for a fair once or twice a year. So it was a very poor use of valuable land. They didn't like the idea. They're going to get taxed more. Single level parking lots are going to get taxed more. And anyone who's using more than their fair share of land and not really serving the community with their land use is going to pay more. They launched a campaign to get the people to vote against this policy. They had airplanes flying with banners saying, vote no on the referendum now to get rid of it. And they had wealth, they had access to media, they had media ads. But you know what? There was enough grassroots people going door to door and showing homeowners how much less they were going to pay in property tax because a homeowner has good value in a house and less value usually in land. So the homeowners showing they're going to pay less. So they became educated enough that they voted to keep it in. And then Allentown moved forward, implementing step by step, and they showed improvements compared to nearby Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, that had the regular form of taxes, but also had government subsidies. But Allentown was doing better. So Pennsylvania has had this experience with about 18 cities. Pittsburgh, our second largest city. Yeah, Philadelphia is the largest, and Pittsburgh's the second, Allentown's the third. Pittsburgh implemented this quite a while back, and they had a very favorable affordable housing ratio compared to other cities. But the town council in place at the time, they hired someone to bring their assessments up to date, didn't understand the policy because it had been in place for decades. And the new assessment vastly increased the land value, which looked like it was going to increase so many people's overall taxes. But they didn't understand that you had to lower the rate. It's called the millage rate, the percentage that's taxed on your house or building value. They had to lower that to compensate for now the increased and more accurate land value assessments. A little bit technical, but fast forward, Pittsburgh was showing the advantages of this policy, and then they didn't have enough understanding about how to keep it, and they said we should just do what everybody else does: regular property tax, taxes houses more than land value. So that was one that took a step backward because, and here we have the key really, of ignorance, ignoring the truth about the power to create or destroy of taxation. As more people would come to understand the power to create or destroy of public finance and understood the importance of this form of taxation, then we would have a bigger popular base to implement it. And Regis, that's the answer, a little bit long, but to your question of implementation, we are the many, they are the few. When the many get out of right versus left, where they have us captured in this stupid game of conflict of Democrat, Republican, and we start to see the deeper forces causing wealth concentration, we, the people, can get together and we can vote in the policies that will bring us an earth rights democracy. In other words, a democracy based on economic fairness, justice, and the essential truth of the human right as a birthright to our land, our resources. All our gifts of nature should not be commodities for buying and selling and speculation. So here what we're seeing on the world stage, you mentioned Witkoff and Trump and Gerard, it's the game played bold that's underlying the land grabbing, the wars, and the imperialism of the United States. But within this, as we see it painted boldly, as you just described, we should be able, hopefully, I pray, to see the bigger picture that's missing in democracy. Democracy as constituted was never formed on the basis of fairness to the gifts of nature. We never had economic democracy to underpin democracy. When you say the right to life, liberty, and it used to be originally it was going to be property. Well, they changed it life, liberty, and happiness. Well, we're not going to be happy if we're working so hard and so long, and still we can't even make enough to pay rent and mortgages, hence the growing homeless problem in the United States.
Well, you sold me. Uh,
Strike one.
I don't own any property anymore.
You're in
I'm living
Crimea.
in Russia, as you know, and I think all of my viewers know by now. Uh, and during the Soviet era, the people owned their own homes, and my wife and I are living in her apartment, which she owns. Her parents own their apartment. Most of our friends uh, of this vintage own their own apartments. And I have to tell you, uh, in my little neighborhood here, which I think the buildings were built during the 50s, maybe the Soviet era, there is still a sense of the commons. I have video that I've taken out of my window of little old ladies. They call them babushkas, grandmothers.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, they're older than I am. They're stooped over and they're raking up the leaves. And then there'll be an older guy, the same age. He will be helping them, raking and putting them in plastic bags, dragging them to the street. And in our apartment building, it's old, but it's very clean. Many of the apartments have been restored, but you'll get these little old ladies cleaning the steps. There's a 5-story building we live in. We're on third floor. Pe- Old people are cleaning. They're outside sweeping, making sure there's no dirt. It's unbelievable. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think the Russian people, the older generation, would understand completely what you're saying. But the problem is, I mentioned before, to people in America and other capitalist countries, those who are benefiting for it are going to scream immediately, socialism, communism, that's evil. It's been painted as evil. So, Alanna, with the time we have left, and this is not going to be the last conversation, I want to drill down much deeper with you on a lot of these topics, okay? Um, how's it going to happen? Are we running out of time? Um,
Important
you
because
know,
what I saw when I traveled through the Soviet Union in 1968 and 9 was that they had solved the basic needs problem.
yeah,
So solved the human basic needs problem. So you had a fairness in this area. What you did not have was freedom. You had to have more centralized control to solve that problem. So therefore, you couldn't have the individual freedom to establish small businesses and small farms and so on. And the larger collective farms were being not as productive as maybe those little areas where people had their garden patch. Highly limited individual freedom. Now, the Western democracies have originally brought about quite a bit of individual freedom, and you get more freedom when you don't tax individuals on their work. So, what we're looking for, how do we have both freedom and fairness? Because the Soviet Union saw the market efficiencies of the West and the inefficiencies of their system. But now the West has to see the inequities, vast inequities, and we're seeing it of our system. So, what is the proper balance between socialism and capitalism? So, here's where we're out of the box. We want to socialize the unearned income from the gifts of nature, which is really, I've looked at the Judeo Christian economic and land ethics. It is that the land is the creator, God's gift, is a koina for the self sufficient livelihood of all, the autarkia. And Charles Avila, in his book, Early Christian Teachings, goes deeply into this. So we want to have the earth treated as a gift. We know humans didn't make the earth, so we need to share it. That is the socialist part. The capitalist part, if you will, is that we want to free up labor on the land, on the earth, by not taxing it. If you want to grow vegetables, if you want to make and sell things, if it's your labor applied to land, it's your private property. Now, going from right to left, the left has said land reform. The right has said private property. What this approach is, a third way out of that box, says private property for all. Okay? You like private property? It's getting awfully hard to get any private property in the United States. You work your whole life for a little plot of land for your house. So private property for all, coming from the right, equals land reform on the left. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does to me. Um, I still come back to the question, and it's the question I have about how do we end war? So many of my friends are peace activists. They pointed out uh, just exactly what you're talking about, what the war economy does to people, their taxes, what it does to the environment. You talked about it's the creator's gift. And one comment I wanted to make is, you talked about Judeo-Christian belief that the land is from the creator for all of us. But the native people in the United States, the indigenous people, wherever they are around the world, fundamentally believe that. And that's the way they live their lives. You took only as much as you needed, you shared. And I have to tell you, and we're going to have to continue this again real soon on a regular basis because I need to dig down into this. It's fascinating to me. But, I've just mentioned that I'm living here in Russia. It's no longer the Soviet Union, but many of the values of the commons about sharing are still prevalent here. I was scolded recently because I took something, a piece of candy, and ate it. And I didn't offer it to everybody else who was there. And they said, this is a basic Russian value. You share. We had so little back in the Soviet days that when somebody had a piece of candy, you would break it up and you would share it, or it was a piece of fruit or whatever it was. And this has had, I think I still haven't completely learned the lesson, but I'm certainly aware of
Shame
it
on you. You were a priest.
now. Well, we can get into that on another occasion, but
Let's do.
anyway, I've really found this fascinating, Alanna. And
Good. Thank you.
we're running out of time a little bit, but we talked about before we started the show a number of things. Uh, how during the Tsarist period and Tolstoy, how he promoted the ideas that you're talking about. We'll come back again. Maybe we'll pick it up from that spot. But I'm looking at the table of contents from your book, The Earth Belongs to Everybody. I'd like to go through some of that because I think uh, you've done a wonderful job of arguing for a different type of world, a different type of paradigm that would benefit everybody and not just the elite. And Alanna, maybe you were involved. I certainly was in the Occupy movement. We are the 99%.
Yes.
And, Obama destroyed the Occupy movement over a weekend. And it's a shame that mobilization of millions of people who understood economic unfairness, uh, economic inequality, and what the effects of that and the impact of that was on people. And you know, Alanna, we're going to come back and talk about this. We saw what the financial elite did to that movement, not only in the United States, all over the world. They crushed it because they saw this as a threat to what you and I are discussing tonight. Alanna, thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm going to schedule another one here very quick. Hopefully, you'll be available.
Thank you so much. This is a wonderful conversation. I so appreciate you.